Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
That's right. Welcome in. It is the Corner 3 here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. I am your host, Austin Oerman. As you see scrolling down below me, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Austin_Oerman. Plenty of information, plenty of insight there. Obviously, college basketball, sports in general, Husker insight, and of course, show updates. If you're listening to the Corner 3, I really do appreciate it. This is kind of the side hustle, the side project here for me at The Ticket. Of course, I am on the show that we call On the Block with Eric Strickland and Jay Foreman, and then Old School with Foreman and Oerman. That's weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. on 93.7 The Ticket and all our streaming platforms as well. So if you like what you're hearing on the Corner 3, would love it if you would come check out the other shows that I do during the week with the guys, with the fellas, Strick and Jay. They're a blast. They're a riot. We get into all sorts of topics, a lot of NFL, a lot of NBA, some MLB here and there, obviously. A lot of college sports is the focus with those guys and myself. So if you're here on the Corner 3, I would certainly direct you to On the Block and Old School as well. But here, Friday nights live from 6 to 7, typically, we have this little ditty called the Corner 3. Today's show is being recorded ahead of time. So your comments, your questions will be taken on the text line 402-464-5685. But odds are they will not see a response night of. You could also, of course, send me a line on Twitter, right, at Austin_Oerman, like I said. Leave a comment on the show. If you're watching it even on the replay or the recorded rerun, it's all right. Leave a comment. I'll make sure to check it. I'll get back to you if you leave a comment there, or just send a message to me directly at Austin_Oerman. All right, lots to get into today, but I think the primary function, the primary focus of this show will be to look at the revenue sharing. There were some really interesting comments from Kansas Athletic Director Travis Goff, and this was reported by the Kansas City Star, so I want to make sure we give them the shout out. Just going to read from the Kansas City Star, their article and what Travis Goff has been on record of saying. So from the Star, Goff provided a glimpse into how revenue sharing would work with the Kansas men's basketball team. He didn't give an exact number, but he noted KU basketball would be in the upper percentile of spending in the sport. I'm pretty confident we are going to be in the top 10 percentile of men's basketball allocation out of the gate, Goff said. I think that number could be in the $4.5 to $5.5 million range if you're at the top. I don't know that, but that's just what I think. More from the Star. What does he expect other power conference schools to spend on basketball? You can basically lock in, let's say, from 3.5 on the lowest for men's basketball to upwards of 5 in terms of millions of dollars, Goff said. Maybe some are stretching into the 5s. None of this is scientific, but these are just what I believe. Goff also reiterated his positivity for the incoming system, saying he'd much rather no teams are spending $3.5 to $5.5 million on basketball, as compared to a huge range of hypothetically $3 million to $30 million, as could have been the case without any guardrails in place. Let's start with this back half of the reporting, the writing, and the quote then from Travis Goff, who does, as he said, appreciate the incoming system with the revenue sharing and with the NIL deals that need to be cleared through Deloitte, because there are a handful of rosters. I think CBS Sports has reported this, that there's, I think, 6 to 8 rosters in the country that are costing more than $10 million right now just for one season. This isn't cumulative value over the course of players' careers. This is what teams are spending on their current roster. Duke, Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky might be up there. I think Purdue has been rumored to be in that range as well. Wouldn't shock me if UConn is in that conversation. Texas Tech might start creeping its way back there as well. Maybe Florida as well in that conversation. So for Travis Goff, and I think I agree with him, it's good to know that the absolute maximum amount that any team could spend on its basketball program would be $20.5 million, right? That's the full portion of the revenue sharing that's available for students to receive from their institution. But as we'll get into here in a little bit, you're not going to see places, blow it all in one spot as much as it might be burning a hole in their pocket, even for some, basketball first schools, it's not all going to go to basketball. So I'll take Travis Goff at his word that he's had other conversations with other athletic departments and, other athletic directors to where he believes, that $3.5 to $5 million range is where the vast majority of schools will fall. That gives coaches, I think, some peace of mind knowing that financials are around, but they might not be the sole reason of decision. They won't be able to blame money as an excuse, right? Because pretty much everyone, according to Travis Goff, will be in a similar ballpark. Now, I'm not saying there's no difference between $3.5 million and $5 million, or no difference between $2.5 million and $5 million if some teams maybe undershoot what Travis Goff is saying. But the difference between, $3.5 and $5 million is a lot different than the difference between $3.5 and $10 million, for example. So, okay, yeah, maybe a step in the right direction. But now let's get back to the first part of this, where Travis Goff says, I'm pretty confident we at Kansas are going to be in the top 10% of men's basketball allocation out of the gate. I think that number could be in the $4.5 to $5.5 million range if you're at the top. I don't know that, but that's just what I think. So, you know what? Let's just go ahead and let's start in Travis Goff's Kansas Jayhawks conference in terms of spending, right? Kansas ought to be in the top 10% of spending in the Big 12 at the very least, and I'm sure that'll put them there nationally. Let's just go through last year's standings in the Big 12. How do I think these schools will distribute their money? Houston, out of the $20.5 million, I could see them being in that $4 to $5 million range. Obviously, they have a football program. It's been up and down, but basketball is really carrying a lot of water for that athletic department right now. I think Houston makes a big investment in its basketball program. Texas Tech is going to make a big investment. How much of that will come from rev share and how much of that will come from NIL deals remains to be seen. So I'm curious to see what Texas Tech does. BYU, I think, is in a similar boat. We know that they're going to invest in basketball. We know that they have to, right? They already have an AJ Devanza, the overall #1 recruit in next year's class. They had to pay to get him. I know BYU will invest and has invested, but will it be through the rev share portion, or will they set aside rev share for football in their other, spring and winter sports? Or will BYU tap into the rev share dollars for men's basketball? It'll be curious to see how Kevin Young and the Cougs go about that. Arizona, I don't know. They got some decisions to make. That's a really solid basketball program there under Tommy Lloyd, but does Arizona have designs on competing in football? Is Arizona a basketball school? Is it a football school? What does Arizona put first? Is it a baseball school? Does baseball steal some resources from men's basketball? We'll have to see. That, of course, was a College World Series qualifying program in Arizona. They're a semi-regular here in Omaha. So what kind of decision does Arizona make? Iowa State, I think, leans a little bit more into football, had their best year in school history by a lot of metrics, by a lot of results. They like Matt Campbell. They've kept him around. I think Iowa State does lean more into football, but I think TJ Otzelberger will get his fair share of revenue as well, at least on a per capita basis, right? Obviously, the raw dollars and cents will always lean toward football just because of how massive that roster is. But I do think that TJ Otzelberger will get legitimate investment from Jamie Pollard and Iowa State. Kansas, like Travis Goff said, is going to be in the top 10% when it comes to at least the rev share portion of things. So I would not be surprised to see Kansas jump Iowa State or Arizona in this conversation, which then you're putting them in that conversation with BYU and Texas Tech. Where does that money come from and where is it going for those two schools remains to be seen. Baylor, I think, is in a similar spot to Iowa State, probably football first. Although, Scott Drew is certainly the more established coach. Maybe he'll have something to say about that. West Virginia, losing Coach DeVries is in an interesting position. Curious to see what the Mountaineers do. TCU, I think, puts more to football. Sorry, Jamie Dixon. Kansas State, there's a team that, Chris Kleiman, I think, is more proven than Jerome Tang at this point. I think football is going to do more for Kansas State than basketball, and I think basketball is in that NIL realm. Will Jerome Tang be able to disentangle himself from such heavy reliance on NIL and the transfer portal and still be able to get similar levels of talent to Manhattan when you just go through the rev share primarily? Or will Kansas State still have to lean heavily on NIL dollars when it comes to putting that team together? Going to be fascinating to see. Utah has a new coach in men's basketball, Kyle Whittingham there in football. I think Utah wants to be better at basketball, but I still think football comes first. Cincinnati just kind of floating out there. What does Cincinnati want to invest in? I think primarily football. UCF got a new old coach, or an old new coach, however you want to phrase that, with Scott Frost. Obviously, UCF was a game opponent for Nebraska in the college basketball crown. Huskers end up winning that game. UCF made its name on football. It really did. I think the bulk of that money will go to football and leave Johnny Dawkins fighting for table scraps. Oklahoma State, we'll have to see. You think about football, right, with Gundy. Steve Lutz has put together a roster for basketball, pretty good one, pretty solid one, with some international flavor to it. But of course, there's another program you have to watch out for with basketball, or not basketball, excuse me, with baseball and with softball. Oklahoma State has some decisions to make. Arizona State, I think, with the momentum that Kenny Dillingham and Sam Levitt has provided, I bet they lean pretty heavily toward football. That's another team that made the college basketball crown last year. And then Colorado. So much of that money is going to go to football, and I think deservedly so. But, Tad Boyle's been around a while. I think he deserves some investment. I think that to a lesser degree than say, a Colorado TCU is in the same boat, where I know TCU football has undergone its fair share of changes recently. But football is what put TCU on the map. Football is what put Colorado on the map. I would say the same for Arizona State right now and Bobby Hurley, where those programs, I think, missed a golden opportunity to secure some more rev share funding for themselves. And they might be a little more reliant on NIL dollars that I think are going to end up harder to come by. So that's kind of where I fall with the Big 12. Before we get into the Big 10, the SEC, and the ACC, I do think that it's worth talking about the Big East in this conversation right now. Obviously, not a lot of those teams are playing football. None of them at the FBS level. Some of them, Villanova comes to mind, playing at the FCS level in football. So it remains to be seen just how much of a percentage of that revenue sharing cap will go to basketball players in the Big East. When we look up and down these standings, St. John's going to be men's basketball. That's going to get the lion's share of the funding, probably a double lion's share of the funding. Creighton, how the Blue Jays choose to invest, right? Women's basketball has been fine. Volleyball has kind of, on the low, dominated the Big East recently. Baseball and softball are getting new facilities for Creighton. Going to be really interested to see how Creighton uses that money, or maybe they send some of it down to Lincoln to support their football team as well. UConn, you really got two major programs, and they're both basketball. I think a lot of that $20.5 million potential is headed that way. Marquette, a lot's going to go to basketball, maybe some to volleyball. Xavier might put a little bit toward baseball, but basketball is going to run things there. Villanova, Georgetown, Butler, Providence, DePaul, Seton Hall. Yeah, the Big East, I think, is going to have the highest number of schools with the highest percentage of their rev share cap going to their basketball programs. I think specifically their men's basketball programs. And then in the case of, at the very least, UConn, maybe Creighton down ballot in that conversation as well, with a fair amount of resources headed to women's basketball as well. So that'll be interesting to monitor. And yes, the Big East will have money for this through some research and finding some other sources. The Big East is giving quite a bit of money to its member schools. The Big East new TV media deal, it's going to run through 2031, has been reportedly worth $480 million over the next 6 years, which is $80 million per year. And when you look at the $80 million divided by the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 schools. Yes, the 11 schools in the Big East, you're looking at $7 million and change from, per year, right? Per year in just the TV deal alone. So that's where I think the question comes in. These Big East schools, yes, they can focus on basketball, But where will more and more of that money come from? A fair amount of it will have to be from the TV deal, but I don't think many Big East schools are going to be spending up to the $20.5 million just because they don't have that football money that's coming in. Now, what they do have will go to basketball, and I think it's going to be good money. I think Big East schools will be able to remain competitive in the marketplace, but I don't think the Big East is suddenly going to become the super major power player in college basketball, men's or women's, just because they don't have to pay football, right? Basketball at these Power 4, Power 5 schools will be getting similar amounts of money. It's just going to be, fewer drops in the overall bucket compared to what it is the Big East will be doing. So I think the Big East is pretty well positioned in not having to pay attention to football in that way, but it also puts them a little bit behind the eight ball, where these other schools in bigger conferences do have more money to play with. So they might give a smaller percentage to their men's basketball teams, but they will still be getting, in terms of raw dollars and cents, a pretty darn good deal, all things considered. Let's go ahead and take a break here. We've talked Big 12. We've talked Big East. When we get back, we'll go through the Big 10. We'll go through the SEC. We'll go through the ACC. I think there are a lot of interesting decisions to be made when it comes to how revenue sharing dollars will be broken up. I'm your host, Austin Oerman. This is the Corner 3 podcast.
Now's the best time to lock in early order savings on a new John Deere planter from Landmark Implement during the early order program. Plant for success with the latest technology, including Exact Emerge high-speed planters that help you cover more acres with greater precision and productivity. Order your planter for next year now to unlock the biggest savings of the season. Contact your local Landmark location today and experience the Landmark difference.
Take control of your health with the DASH scan at Advanced Medical Imaging. The DASH scan is a full-body MRI designed for advanced health screening. This dynamic approach provides exceptionally sharp images across multiple organ systems, helping to detect potential concerns early. With minimal radiation and no invasive procedures, the DASH scan offers a safe, comprehensive look at your health. Plus, results are delivered faster than ever, giving both patients and physicians confidence in screening and diagnosis. Your health is too important to wait. Schedule your DASH scan today at Advanced Medical Imaging. Visit amimaging.com or call 402-484-6677 to learn more.
Have you been injured in an accident and don't know where to turn? You need an attorney you can trust to handle your case with professionalism and compassion. The attorneys at Liberty Law Group understand that a call to an attorney is a call for help. If you've been injured, we want to help you. Liberty Law's experienced attorneys are committed to the pursuit of justice for those injured. Call Liberty Law Group and find out how we can help get you the compensation you deserve. Call 877-42-LIBERTY. 877-42-LIBERTY. Liberty Law Group. Trial attorneys you can trust.
Safety is always at the top of mind at Lincoln Electric System. The safety of our employees and the safety of our customers. It's National Safety Month. Visit les.com/safety for tips on all things related to electrical safety. If you're working in your yard, remember never to place landscaping, structures, and fences too close to above-ground electrical equipment. It's unsafe and could cost you financially. Visit les.com for a complete fence and landscaping installation guide.
Are you looking to upgrade or improve the garage door on your home? This is Cameron Hall of Doors Plus. At Doors Plus, we guarantee to offer a wide selection of options from 5 leading garage door manufacturers as we deliver a free estimate, exact measurements, and rapid installation with a 3 to 5 week time frame. When you choose Doors Plus for your residential garage door needs, you'll work with our experienced technicians and be ensured that your new door seamlessly complements your home. Give us a call at 402-590-5800 or visit us online at DoorsPlusLLC.com. Doors Plus, garage doors, and more.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Welcome back to segment 2 of the Corner 3 podcast. I am your host, Austin Oerman. You see it scrolling below me if you're watching on social media. You can give me a follow on Twitter, interact with the show at Austin_Oerman. If you're also watching on stream, you saw the hat come off. You know, we're down to business. We're down to brass tacks. Let's get back to it. As we talk rev share and how that money will be distributed in schools with easy decisions versus tough decisions to make, we're hopping into the Big Ten Conference right now. last year's conference winner, Michigan State, I think has a big decision on its hands. Is basketball number one or is basketball number two? The coach, Tom Izzo, I think deserves spot number one in that athletic department. Everything he's done for that program, everything he's meant for that program. Michigan State is a basketball school, not a blue blood, but a basketball school. But they're a respectable football program. Not a great one. Year 2 under Coach Jonathan Smith coming up. They need money for football. They got to get better. They've made the college football playoff before, the 4-team version, the one that was more difficult to make, not just the 12-team version. So I'm going to be really, really curious to see how Michigan State handles rev share. Same with a school like Maryland, right? With a lot of backing from a company like Under Armour. How much does Maryland put into basketball from the rev share versus the NIL game? I still think Maryland at its core is a basketball school. I think it's an ACC school, obviously. And to me, when you say you're an ACC school, more often than not, that's going to mean you're a basketball school. Plus, you just got a new coach in Buzz Williams in town, so you got to pony up to help him there. I think Maryland ends up leaning into football because Mike Loxley has done a good job recruiting the DMV, getting a lot of talent to College Park. So I do think that football will end up taking priority for Maryland. I'm not so sure that's the right decision. I do think it is the right decision for Michigan. Michigan is obviously a football-first school, is what you think of when you think of the Wolverines. But that's not to sell short the job that Dusty May did in year 1 at Michigan, the work he did in putting together a really solid transfer class. I think Michigan will dedicate more time, more resources to football, but I'd be really curious to see and monitor the situation in Ann Arbor to see if basketball can maybe take a chunk out of the rev share dollars from the athletic department. We know Michigan will have NIL money, quite a bit of it. Will they prefer to use that NIL money for basketball or for football? Or does Michigan become one of those schools that has a limitless supply of money, right? Where it doesn't matter. They'll give out their 20 and a half, but they don't have to break it down super specifically because whatever they don't pay in rev share, they feel confident about getting cleared through Deloitte in the NIL Go deals portal. So I do think Michigan leans more into football than it does basketball, but I do think there's at least, some interesting conversations to be had. I would say the same for Wisconsin. Probably a football first school, but this is where Luke Fickell hasn't done himself any favors. Greg Gard has been incredibly consistent throughout his time at Wisconsin. I say that the year after he went from that slow, grinded out play defense, milk the shot clock formula to the high octane, top 15 offense in college basketball version that the Badgers were this year behind John Tonje and company. I think that Wisconsin is going to invest in basketball, but I think it's a clear number 2. Unlike at Michigan State, where I think that line is blurred between what's the top priority to take care of, the football program that brings in more money or the basketball program that's what you're known for. Another team in that similar boat or riding a similar train, if you will, is Purdue. Certainly. And Matt Painter is the most established coach at that school in terms of pedigree, in terms of success, in terms of identity. Another new football coach in the doors at Purdue. How will they handle that? It's another program, another opportunity missed, I think, for football to establish some footing under Ryan Walters in preparation for the rev share era, because we know that for all the Big Ten schools, the majority of the money is coming from the football contract. But for Purdue doesn't really have a football identity. It's Joe Tiller and Drew Brees back in the day. Maybe Jeff Brom started to say, yeah, maybe Purdue can be, a bowl-eligible football program more consistently. But obviously he jumps ship. He goes to the alma mater. Did make the trip back to Omaha for the College World Series. So good to see Coach Brom in the stands there. But I think, relative to the rest of the league, basketball is going to be a bigger priority for Purdue and for Michigan State, where the basketball program has been at the forefront of getting to know those institutions compared to a place like Michigan, who's been good at football, obviously national champs a couple years ago, and, has done some damage in basketball as well, right? End of the Juwan Howard era notwithstanding. I think UCLA's in that conversation too. An established coach who's gotten results like Mick Cronin compared to a newbie on the block in Deshaun Foster coaching football. Baseball for UCLA also comes into consideration. Women's basketball has to play into this picture as well. And being a West Coast school, you think UCLA is in some of those same discussions where, they want to be in the Director's Cup hunt with a lot of different programs consistently competing for championships. So UCLA has some decisions to make. Illinois is going to be interesting. I don't think a lot of people nationally think of Illinois, but I think that Brett Bielema has done a good job of bringing back that program's respect on the football side of things. He hasn't been there as long, but I do think that Brett Bielema is still probably the figurehead for that institution. I think all the conversation around Illinois is going to start with football moving forward. So I think that Illinois, maybe you would have known them more for basketball, back in the D. Brown, Luther Head sort of days. But I think now with Brett Bielema in charge, Illinois getting some, top 15 love in preseason polls, I think Illinois is going to be a school that pushes a surprising amount of resources and focus to football, not neglecting basketball, which has been good, which has been solid. But I do think Illinois wants to lean more into football. That's the direction I see that one heading. I think Oregon is in the Michigan boat, where you think of football first, but they've been good at a lot of sports across the board. So it's more a matter of, which resources go where instead of will they have the resources for it. Indiana really intrigues me. Kurt Cignetti had an incredible debut season in Bloomington, but there's another new coach in Indiana that a lot of people are excited about in Darian DeVries. How much do you invest in a coach who's right now a one-year wonder, but has still proven something at this level? And a coach like Darian DeVries, who you just brought in, who was really good at Drake, had a darn good year at West Virginia, given the circumstances, and then he had to pay a bunch of money to leave Morgantown for Bloomington. It's going to be really, really interesting to watch Indiana and see if they do, give more than the $3.5 to $4 million. If Indiana is a $5 million, basketball program or more, and then for football, do they go up to the $15.5 million? Or does Indiana back it off of football and say, you know what, the $12 or $13 million that we can put into football is still more than this program has had in a long time, if not ever. So we need to allocate more resources to get basketball back to where we think it is. Sorry, baseball, sorry, women's basketball, and other sports like that. I could see Indiana shaving a couple mil off the football budget to get to basketball in year one of Darian DeVries and to reconstitute Indiana in the national conversation every year. Ohio State is in the Oregon-Michigan boat, lots of money. Doesn't really matter where it comes from because they'll have it. Rutgers, we'll see. I really don't know. I mean, Shiano is an institution. He is a staple at Rutgers now in his second tenure there. Has Steve Peichel become that? Can those two, fight for resources on the margins? They both need them. They absolutely both need the same resources. So I'm curious to see how Rutgers will handle that under some new leadership. Minnesota, I don't know, PJ Fleck, again, a guy that's been there, but a new coach in Nico Medved. Where do you put the resources? Minnesota has been so drastically low in terms of NIL that maybe the rev share could help that basketball program if it does get, $3.5 or $4 million to work with, which I think Nico Medved deserves. I think he's a darn good coach. But will Minnesota give him those resources, or is this their push to go all in on PJ Fleck? Northwestern, Collins versus David Braun. I don't know. Northwestern was not as good last year, of course, dealt with some major injury problems, especially in the late part of the year. When you think of Northwestern, you think about school. So maybe they reinvest some of their $20.5 million that's on the table back into the academic side. I say tongue firmly planted in cheek. I think football is the priority. I do. But I wouldn't, again, be surprised to see basketball cut into some of that resource pool when it comes to revenue sharing. NIL is certainly around at Northwestern, but it's not necessarily prevalent. So I do think that for Northwestern and the future health and success of men's basketball, it's going to be really, really fascinating to watch and see how their athletics leadership treats Chris Collins and how much of that pie he gets. USC football first. I think that's a given. Iowa football first, I would guess. I would guess Iowa goes football first. I don't think basketball is that far behind, but Iowa's going to want to get some revenge on Nebraska, still, in search of Penn State as well. So I think Iowa will invest pretty heavily in wrestling. I think it's football, maybe even women's basketball and wrestling, and then maybe men's basketball. I don't know. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but I do think there's a real conversation to be had at Iowa in terms of the priorities for the Hawkeyes after football. I still think that's where they lean. Men's basketball has been, tournament team or fringy pretty much every year since Fran McCaffrey took over. Probably worthy of investment in, but women's basketball has certainly had its fair share of momentum over the last 5 years, and wrestling is wrestling. So I don't think priorities 2, 3, and 4 are nearly as clear-cut at Iowa as they are other places. Penn State's going to be football, almost exclusively football and volleyball, right, in a similar vein to Nebraska. And then Washington, TBD. I really don't know which direction Washington is going to go. How much do they believe in Danny Sprinkle as the men's basketball coach? Not a great year for them last year, 4-16 in conference play, 13-18 overall. That's a solid football program. Obviously, college football, finalists not long ago when they lost to Michigan. But when you look at Washington, how many resources do they have? How many do they use? I do think that Microsoft money maybe goes under the radar a little bit with Washington being located in Seattle. How those resources get broken up, my guess is the majority goes to football, and then Danny Sprinkle can make do with pretty much whatever's left, because they're not going to invest huge in volleyball, women's basketball, baseball, anything like that. I wouldn't think at Washington. Certainly haven't heard of many other powerhouse programs for the Huskies. So I think football is pretty safe at Washington, all things considered, and we'll gloss over Nebraska. We've had plenty of those conversations on these 93.7 The Ticket airwaves. Let's go ahead and before we take our second break of the show, let's go ahead and go through the SEC, and then we'll wrap up in the ACC in our final segment. So for the SEC, Auburn. Decisions. You think that Auburn is probably a football school, but Bruce Pearl has made basketball a much bigger player in that realm than football's been recently. Bruce Pearl, I think, is going to cut into some football resources at Auburn. Florida, football first, but they're the defending national champions. Todd Golden has proven worthy of investment at this point. I think basketball cuts into some football resources down at Florida. Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised to see Alabama maybe shave a little bit off of basketball to make sure that Kalen DeBoer doesn't have an excuse of money or lack of investment or funding. Obviously, it's Alabama. That is a football blue blood, especially over the course of the last 15, 20 years. But Nate Oates has really made that program into something. 13-5, just 2 games back of the regular season crown in the SEC last year. 28-9 overall, made it to the East Regional Finals against Duke. So I think Alabama probably pushes to football, but I think basketball is getting kind of an MOU, a memo of understanding, saying, yep, don't worry, we know you're doing well, we'll give you what you need, and then hopefully when football gets on track, the cap rises, we can give you a bigger piece of the pie. Baseball was fine. I don't think it's quite as great. I mean, they made the NCAA tournament this year and didn't do a whole lot with it. So I think there's some resource sharing among the bottom portion, but really I think it's just those big two for Alabama. Football, I think, gets a little extra this year. When it comes to Tennessee, college football playoff team, perennial top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament now under Rick Barnes, and a top 15, probably top 10 program in the country under Tony Vitello in baseball. Man, it's hard to say that Tennessee doesn't deserve, full resources in football, but Rick Barnes has been so darn consistent on Rocky Top on the basketball side. And Tennessee baseball, I still think, has some of that luster and excitement around it. You can't afford to not invest in those programs. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Tennessee be a program that maybe splits the rev sharing a little bit more in favor of men's basketball. Obviously, men's basketball has a lot of history there too, and baseball. Football will get its fair share, but I do think that that's a place where basketball will cut in. Texas A&M, I think, is going to see an opportunity to push more resources to football. with Mike Elko, winning the normal number of games at Texas A&M, always in that 7 to 10 win range for the Aggies, it seems. Never good enough to make the playoff, never bad enough to, quote unquote, tank, if you will, in college football. And, with Buzz Williams leaving College Station for College Park, I really think Texas A&M is going to see this as a way to say, you know what, Bucky McMillan, we hired you for a reason. We like you. Football's more proven. Football is our bread and butter. We got to beat Texas. We got to catch up to, a Tennessee and be on that level. So I could kind of see Texas A&M men's basketball maybe getting some hair shaved off the top for a few years until Bucky McMillan proves whether he can stick or not at the SEC level. Ole Miss, I think, is going to go in on football with Lane. I think Chris Beard's going to fight for resources there in Ole Miss. He'll get some, but I don't think basketball is going to be the priority. Then we get to Kentucky. Man, Kentucky and Mark Stoops, their, will they, won't they, on again, off again sort of relationship has been really interesting to track over the last handful of years, really. Of course, Stoops was close to taking the A&M job before A&M fans got wind of that and said, you can do better. Instead, they get Mike Elko, who I don't think is a bad coach, but I think I would probably prefer Mark Stoops, even if it's over the next just 5 to 10 years before Stoops retires, somewhere in that window. But obviously, Kentucky is a huge player in basketball. There's been some fighting, right, recently between, the men's basketball program and the football program. Not as much with Mark Pope in charge anymore as it was with John Calipari and Mark Stoops. But I think that at Kentucky, figuring out, they know that basketball is the number one priority, but figuring out what level of investment they want in football. Do they want to be just a perennial bowl team, or do they think that they can be a program that wins, 9 games a year and gets into that college football playoff conversation, at least early on? They've proven capable of that. I mean, Kentucky has been not just a top 25, but a top 15, top 10 program at times under Mark Stoops in any given year. So I'm curious to see how many resources he gets compared to basketball. Missouri, we'll see. The Tigers have been a little sporadic in basketball, up and down, and then up again this year before the first round exit against Drake. I think Coach Drinkwitz is standing on business, as Jay Foreman of On the Block and Old School would say. I think football's the priority at Missouri. I think basketball's a pretty clear number 2. Arkansas, really interesting. You don't pony up for a guy like John Calipari unless you're willing to pay, which they certainly have in the NIL realm. They certainly have compensated Calipari, to make sure that he would leave Lexington for Fayetteville. I don't know which is the priority at Arkansas. I think to its core, it wants to be a football school, but you went and got John Calipari, and you have some Nolan Richardson history to lean on. And what Eric Musselman was doing before he left to go to USC, I'm not saying football is going to be dethroned as number 1, but I think basketball is closer to a priority in Arkansas's leadership's mind, maybe than people on the outside would think it is. Mississippi State will be football first. Georgia will obviously be football first. Vandy remains to be seen. Oklahoma and Texas both went 6-12 in the SEC in their first year in men's basketball. Oklahoma, needs to go more in on football. I think Brent Venables is going to get more help and support than Porter Moser will. Texas is in that Ohio State and Michigan conversation where football is going to be the focus. Obviously, Texas invested in the transfer portal, but of course, in the coaching market, they go out and they get Sean Miller. So you don't go get a guy like that, right, just to not support him and not pay, to make sure he has a top-notch roster. I think for Texas, though, it's more going to be about, which resources do we put where? Not, well, where the heck are the resources coming from? Do we have money for all of this? Texas is one of those big Directors Cup programs. So there will be money for Texas. Football is going to be the priority, but I think basketball will certainly be taken care of and not feel like an afterthought. LSU, basketball will be an afterthought. That's going to be football. And then I think baseball is the pretty clear number 2. I think basketball and women's basketball are both probably fighting right now for resources, and women's basketball might even take the cake over men's basketball, which brings us to South Carolina at the end of the SEC, just 2-16 in conference play as part of a 12-20 campaign for the Gamecocks. Football is going to be the priority, right? A potential number 1 overall pick in Lenora Sellers at quarterback. Shane Beamer's done some pretty good work there. Not to say Lamont Paris hasn't, but last year was not good. I think South Carolina really missed an opportunity to get some more resources in the college basketball realm. And dare I say, it's probably fallen to fourth in the pecking order. I think football's number one, probably women's basketball and Dawn Staley at number two. And then I think baseball wants to get back to the level that it was, a decade or so ago. I really think South Carolina baseball wants to make a comeback. So men's basketball, I think, fighting for third place and in fourth right now. Let's take our final break of the show. We'll go over the ACC. I think there's some more interesting discussions and futures to keep in mind there. That's how we'll wrap up this revenue sharing episode of the Corner 3 right after this.
Now's the best time to lock in early order savings on a new John Deere planter from Landmark Implement during the early order program. Plant for success with the latest technology, including Exact Emerge high-speed planters that help you cover more acres with greater precision and productivity. Order your planter for next year now to unlock the biggest savings of the season. Contact your local Landmark location today and experience the Landmark difference.
Take control of your health with the DASH scan at Advanced Medical Imaging. The DASH scan is a full-body MRI designed for advanced health screening. This dynamic approach provides exceptionally sharp images across multiple organ systems, helping to detect potential concerns early. With minimal radiation and no invasive procedures, the DASH scan offers a safe, comprehensive look at your health. Plus, results are delivered faster than ever, giving both patients and physicians confidence in screening and diagnosis. Your health is too important to wait. Schedule your DASH scan today at Advanced Medical Imaging. Visit amimaging.com or call 402-484-6677 to learn more.
Have you been injured in an accident and don't know where to turn? You need an attorney you can trust to handle your case with professionalism and compassion. The attorneys at Liberty Law Group understand that a call to an attorney is a call for help. If you've been injured, we want to help you. Liberty Law's experienced attorneys are committed to the pursuit of justice for those injured. Call Liberty Law Group and find out how we can help get you the compensation you deserve. Call 877-42-LIBERTY. 877-42-LIBERTY. Liberty Law Group. Trial attorneys you can trust.
Safety is always at the top of mind at Lincoln Electric System. The safety of our employees and the safety of our customers. It's National Safety Month. Visit les.com/safety for tips on all things related to electrical safety. If you're working in your yard, remember never to place landscaping structures and fences too close to above-ground electrical equipment. It's unsafe and could cost you financially. Visit les.com for a complete fence and landscaping installation guide.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Back one final time here on the Corner 3 podcast. I am your host, Austin Oerman. Thanks for finding it. It's been a fun episode. We've gone through a bunch of power conferences, how I anticipate its teams or their teams going through the revenue sharing era, navigating the start of it, how I think those resources will be distributed. We've done the Big 12, we've done the Big East, the Big 10, and the SEC. And here's the afterthought, the ACC. Once a proud basketball conference, attempting to take steps to get back there, but how will its programs handle revenue sharing? Of course, this is a massive conference with 18 teams, so we'll give some abbreviated thoughts on most of these. I think Duke, who won the conference last year, is in a similar position to Kansas, but I could see Kansas honestly investing more in football relative to the cap than Duke will. I think Lance Leipold is a better football coach than Manny Diaz. So I think the Big 12 is also maybe a little bit more gettable in terms of a year-to-year chance to win it when you come to the football conversation, right? Basketball is always going to be a bloodbath, but Big 12 football is just a jumbled mess. It's a puzzle that you got to put together every year. The ACC has some more heavyweights, I think, at the top of that conference in football, or at least potential heavyweights. So, between men's basketball and women's basketball, I think Duke is certainly going to be in that 90th percentile plus in terms of spending in basketball. Louisville, decisions to make a really fantastic year one for Pat Kelsey and crew. They're getting a lot of top 5 preseason love in men's basketball. Solid football program, though, right? That's a bowl plus program under Jeff Brom, who's an alum. I think football is going to get its fair share, but basketball might be the priority at Louisville. Obviously football will always get more raw dollars, but I think Louisville basketball is going to take some real resources from football. I mean, baseball did qualify for the College World Series as well. Women's basketball has been up and down for the Cards. So I'm curious to see how they break it up. But I do think men's basketball is going to have something to say in the rev share conversation, even though, it's only year 2 for Pat Kelsey. Brad Brownell, on the other hand, I think is fighting for second place. I think Clemson basketball, it's inarguable, is on probably its best run in school history right now. Clemson football wants to get back to that, right? Dabo Swinney did his work early, is going to get the Lions' share, or the Tigers' share in this case, of the resources. Obviously, Clemson baseball's been really, really good under Eric Bakich. Maybe some shortcomings in the postseason, but that's a team that's competing at the top of the ACC in baseball. So I could see men's basketball being number 2 behind football, but in a bit of a dogfight, more of a dogfight than I think it would want with baseball. Wake Forest, TBD. I have no idea what's going on in that athletic department. Football, forgettable. Basketball, NIT every year. Baseball, good, but not the same this year as it has been the last couple years. That's an athletic department that has some real questions to answer, and how that money gets distributed will tell you a lot about how they think about it. North Carolina, faced with a rather unenviable situation where, as a basketball blue blood, a basketball school, that's obviously what you think of first and foremost, but they didn't go hire their version of Lance Leipold. They didn't go hire their version of Manny Diaz. They hired Bill Bleepin Belichick. You're going to tell me you're not going to give that guy every resource, every opportunity possible to succeed, but you're going to tell me you're going to divert resources from men's basketball to football at Carolina? Might be some uncomfortable conversations, and making sure that everyone is happy and taken care of there for Bubba Cunningham. SMU is going to be football first, solid basketball program, but I don't think that's anywhere close to number 1 there. Stanford, a lot of money, right? Private institution. I think football with Andrew Luck there, as he will have to undergo a full coaching search as the GM of that football program after hiring Frank Reich as the interim, the late firing of Troy Taylor. Football's probably number 1 at Stanford, but was volleyball in that conversation? Baseball's been pretty solid recently. I don't think men's basketball will be shorted, but I think men's basketball won't be a priority necessarily for Stanford either. Georgia Tech, football first, men's basketball second and a half in a dogfight with baseball. Virginia Tech will be pretty darn football heavy, I would wager. I think that's a proud program that wants to get back to things and just appreciates basketball success when it has it. Florida State needs to invest a lot in football. I think with Luke Laux coming in to be the head coach from the NBA ranks, Florida State basketball ought to get up and going again. But I think there's going to be a huge push from Seminoles boosters and leadership to get good at football again. And hey, thanks, Leonard Hamilton. Appreciate you. Thanks for stepping aside. We'll check in on basketball later. Virginia, I don't know. What is Virginia really known for? Of course, they just lost Brian O'Connor in baseball. He's going to Mississippi State. Is baseball number 1 at Virginia? I think there's an argument. Obviously, football is going to bring the eyeballs and the money. I don't think football is the priority at Virginia. Basketball, probably. But are you as willing to give that money to Ryan Odom and say, yeah, we trust you, go do it, as you would have been to Tony Bennett? I think basketball is probably number 1 at Virginia and does take some hair off of football. And I think baseball does as well. I mean, football, like I've said a lot, and it bears repeating, is going to get the most raw dollars. But in terms of attention and relative to the rest of the teams in the league and teams in all these athletic departments as well, I could see football getting a smaller chunk at Virginia because of men's basketball and because of baseball. Notre Dame's going to be primarily football. Really curious to see what Micah Shrewsbury can do, maybe with a little bit less in the men's basketball realm. Good coach, not fully sold on him. Think he deserves resources, but coming up on a football season that Notre Dame just finished number 2 in the country, right? National runner-up. Football is going to always be the priority for Notre Dame. Pitt, TBD. I think Jeff Capel has missed some opportunities to cut into some resources. I think he and Narduzzi are probably on the same level as coaches relative to their competition. Curious to see how that goes. Syracuse basketball, I think, is sliding. Syracuse is a basketball school. That's what you think of first and foremost when you think of the Orange. But a really surprise first year for Fran Brown nation's passing leader in Kyle McCord. I think football took some resources from men's basketball this year. Now, Syracuse will certainly invest and make sure basketball gets back up and going again, but I think they could have been even better positioned in this rev share era had Red Autry been able to get that program out of the mud. Right? I mean, 14-19 last year, 7-13 in conference play. I think Syracuse men's basketball has missed some opportunities. Cal, probably football. I would guess we'll have to see. NC State, I think, is going to end up being a basketball school, again, with Will Wade in charge. Football's been solid. Football's been essentially the Iowa of the ACC. I think there's more buzz around basketball. So I think that Will Wade is going to come in and take some resources from football. Boston College is going to be football. And same with Miami. I wish the best for Jay Lucas. May he dominate the ACC outside of Duke and always finish behind the Blue Devils, but a lot of respect for him and the work he did for the Blue Devils this last year. Miami's had some basketball success in the last decade. Baseball has certainly been up there too. Women's basketball had its headlines, but come on, it's the U. It's Miami. Football is always going to be priority number one. Let's go ahead and call that a show right there. If you agree or disagree with anything I've been saying, please do not hesitate to let me know. As always, the best place to do that is on Twitter at Austin_Oerman. You can also fire off a text 402-464-5685. Thank you so much for listening. We'll do it again another episode next week. Thinking about a mailbag episode. So if you have any questions that you want to send in, please at Austin_Oerman or text them into the 93.7 The Ticket kind of hotline. I'll write them down and we'll go from there. So we'll talk to you next week. Thanks a ton for listening. Austin Oerman signing off.